Hello again. It's nice to see so many of the same faces back after the break. I hope everyone charged. The afternoon will continue to deliver some exciting content. All the content from today will be available to view on demand within 24 to 48 hours. So don't worry if you missed something a little bit earlier. Let's head back into one of the many focal points of today's event, workforce wellbeing. The rail industry workforce is the most valuable asset when it comes to operating, building, running, and supporting. To retain the workforce and keep them happy and healthy, we must give employee wellbeing the attention it deserves to allow individuals and teams to thrive. And that's why events like this are so valuable, affording us the chance to really listen to what those in rail have to say, learn from others, and find out what's important to the sector to continue to improve wellbeing at work. So to discuss with us how we support employees' mental health and their workplace culture to make rail a better and safer place to work, we have Patience Chiketero, Occupational Health and Wellbeing Manager at Network Rail, Rachel Avenell, Comms and Engagement Specialist for Rail Delivery Group, and Llewellyn, HR Wellbeing Specialist at Transport for Greater Manchester. And don't forget the Q&A feature to the right side of your screens. Actually, I think it's at the bottom of your screens, and it's built in so that you can have your voice included in the conversation. So if you've got any questions for our guests, our all-female panel, do pop them over. Welcome, panel 4. It's great to see you all and see that all the tech's working, which is brilliant. Patience, can we start with you? You're a qualified specialist nurse as well as occupational health and wellbeing manager in the Eastern region at Network Rail. What support do you have for wellbeing and mental health within Network Rail?
Thank you, Helen. Within Network Rail, we have had a wide range of support that we have available. And this stems from we have training and then we have individual support. But I will sum up what an individual has an access to. We have the obvious line manager support that one can have when they are having challenges with their well-being. And you can also contact or get support from human resources, or you can we have support from occupational health itself. And let alone if you do have challenges, we have our employee assistance program. And at present, we are supported by PalmAssist, which is that provides services for our employees as well as the families that live with them, and that can have an impact on their well-being.
And do you find, Patience, that the fact that you are qualified as a specialist nurse, does that really help with your role and the understanding of what people need?
Yes, it is. It makes it much, much better. And it also makes, it gives me that professional background that I can quickly sense certain things and use my professional judgment. And then the medical knowledge does also have an impact. So it can help steer the programs that we have. And sometimes it doesn't need, it's not always in the rule book, but sometimes it needs the human being, and that human being full of compassion can make the difference. So, yes.
That's something actually that we've been touching on this morning when we were talking about things like technology, and digital transformation and the importance of having that human touch still, which is still really, really important. Rachel, into the conversation, if we may, what has Rail Delivery Group done to support its employees in recent years?
Thanks, Helen. So we have a mental health awareness group that's been going for nearly 3 years now. And they meet monthly. I'm part of that group, and we're kind of there just to sort of steer the conversation, really. I think one of our sort of founding principles, and again, sort of building on what Patience said around the fact that you have to have that people aspect. It's not just about kind of, we've always been quite clear that this isn't about sort of business targets or anything like that, but it's very much about looking after the people that you work alongside and providing that support. So the groups kind of put a lot of emphasis on sort of really starting to open up that conversation. that we've really benefited from, particularly in the last 2 years, is actually having sort of a lot of wellbeing support in place already. We've also got our employee assistance program. We have monthly Wellbeing Wednesday sessions, which are pretty informal, but just kind of create space for people to come and talk about anything really. And they can sort of range from some serious wellbeing issues to actually just kind of having a chat and seeing how people are. And I think that's our sort of fundamental really, is just kind of creating that space for people to have conversations if they want to, signposting them to tools that could support them. And I think that's something that we've always been really keen to kind of emphasize, that we're not the experts, we're not medically trained, but we can signpost people in the right direction if and when they ever needed that support. And of course, you hope that people don't need that support, but if they did, it's important that they know where to find it. And that's something that we've kind of really tried to drive over the last few years.
And Rachel, just before I bring Jo into the conversation, have you found that people have been quite receptive to the group? I mean, it sounds like your group started before the pandemic, so, before that sort of raised awareness of many people feeling a bit isolated and suffering mental health wise. But do you feel you've created an environment where people feel quite relaxed and comfortable to come and chat and don't worry about, how's this going to affect my career? And is there quite an ease, if you like, of people coming forward and enjoying that communication?
Definitely. I think in the early days of having the group, maybe less so, but actually something that we've always tried to be is really transparent about some of our own challenges that we've been through. I mean, I've got my own challenges I've been through. I've always been very open about those. And I do think that breeds a sense of trust. And I think it does create that kind of safe space. And I think it's also important that people don't feel like they have to open up if they don't want to, because not everybody wants to talk about their mental health and their well-being, especially if they are struggling. But it's just that A, if they wanted to, that is there for them to do, and B, if they didn't want to talk but they wanted to find some other sources of support, we really clearly signpost where they are. So it's just kind of, it's providing a range of mechanisms, I think, for people. So the sort of private one-to-one conversations, we've got some mental health first aiders in the workplace who are really kind of great at I just need to have a quick chat, can I call you? Of course, that's absolutely fine. But then also just sort of having those more open conversations around some of the challenges that we're all facing, particularly over the last 2 years.
Yeah, safe space is so important, isn't it, Jo? I mean, what's your approach at Transport for Greater Manchester?
Hi there, Helen. Really similar actually to some of the points that Rachel was just raising. So at Transport for Greater Manchester, we were lucky enough, if you like, to be quite advanced with the wellbeing agenda before the pandemic arrived on the scene. So it meant that, if you like, we weren't starting from scratch and not even close to it, following on from the pandemic starting. And it's been a key component of our culture for quite some time. So really, during the pandemic, it's been an opportunity to really build on that through some of the activities that we've brought in and some of the key messaging that we've highlighted to our employees over this time. We talk quite heavily about having a culture of openness about well-being, and we actively invite colleagues to talk to their line managers about anything that's concerning them or worrying them, anything that they're going through personally. And we've provided our line managers and equipped them with skills and training to enable them to pick up on the signs as to what to look out for if one of their team members was struggling. And we've also introduced a number of tools for managers to use so that they can regularly, if you like, pick up with their team members and have those sorts of conversations. One of those, actually, an example of that is a wellbeing plan that we use on a regular basis with colleagues. And it's an opportunity to really check in with them to see how some of the steps or areas of support are progressing, or whether they're working, or we need to kind of update them to make sure that we're giving the right range of support. Over the course of the pandemic as well, we've introduced things like wellbeing webinars, which I've delivered personally in-house, linking that through to my own personal experiences, but also expertise in this area. And we also regularly get in speakers on really interesting topics that colleagues are finding helpful. And during the course of last year, we we had a number of webinars across a range of topics, such as the menopause, and also sort of men's suicide was touched on as well. So we really kind of got into some of the really gritty subjects throughout the course of the year as well, that I know lots of colleagues found helpful, either personally or also kind of like for their own personal knowledge as well, and development.
I think what was interesting there is both you and Rachel said that you've talked about your own personal experiences. And I think that gives a great deal of confidence, doesn't it, Jo, when somebody's willing to stand up there and actually share something of their lived experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that vulnerability, I think that if people are willing to share sort of their own experiences and vulnerability, it really gives the confidence to others to be able to reach out when they're struggling as well. It really does make all the difference.
Got a couple of questions. Perhaps, Patience, you can kick us off with the first one. Fraser's asking, how do you think attitudes have changed towards the understanding of employees' mental health and the impact on safer working amongst senior managers?
Okay. In response to that, I will give you an example of what we've had within Network Rail and within the Eastern region. So when way before the pandemic, we decided to tackle mental well-being and looking at well-being as a whole. We did focus on training individuals so that they can be aware of mental well-being. But then we also trained line managers. So we went on a mission and trained quite a number of them. So we trained at least about 200, 300, between 200 to 300 line managers. And by doing so, we it made it much easier for them to understand when individuals experience challenges with their well-being. And we had an individual who had been present in the tsunami way back, years before. But then when we started this program, and because we were talking about mental well-being openly, and it was being talked with managers, with individuals at all levels, this individual was at breaking point because of the trauma he had experienced back then. And this is a couple of years later. And luckily, one of the champions picked it up. One of our mental well-being champions picked it up, and rightly so, right in time. And the individual was supported, was managed, got the support that he needed, got the counseling and everything, and he recovered. And I'm glad to say he's not part of the statistics. It's because of how we have improved the understanding of well-being and looking at it holistically rather than from one corner and not addressing every aspect of it.
Gosh, what an inspirational story there. And great, as you say, great to see that person didn't end up a statistic and yes, that was spotted in time. Rachel, I'm sure it must be really rewarding actually for you in the group when you have stories perhaps along those lines where you see somebody in crisis and they come and they reach out for help and you're able to have a really positive outcome and help somebody.
Definitely. And I think it is rewarding. It can be challenging as well, I think, because also, and one of the things that I've always said is that actually to support other people's mental health and well-being, you have to be mentally well yourself. And actually sometimes you do, as a mental health first aider or somebody who champions mental health, sometimes you actually have to take a step back from that and say, okay, I'm not in a great place right now. I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's not that I don't care, but it's actually, this would sort of add to my own mental load. And you really have to, I think you have to have that element of self-awareness. But we've definitely seen in the last few years this kind of culture where people do feel kind of more confident just to drop you a Teams message and say, look, I'm not great, or somebody in my team isn't feeling great, can we just have a quick chat? And I think that knowing that you've been able to provide that support to that person or those group of people is actually, it's incredibly rewarding. And I think particularly as it's kind of not part of the day job, if you like, it's sort of something that we do alongside it, but it is just nice to know that they trust you to kind of open up when they're feeling vulnerable. And I think that's something that's really key, and one of the reasons why I love doing what I do and talking about mental health, because I think that it's so important that we create that space where people feel like they can reach out if they ever needed to. And I think it's just so key that we continue to do it even as the world goes back to normal, whatever that looks like. I think we've got this increased awareness now of well-being, and it's just something that we really need to continue kind of beyond the end of the pandemic. Whenever that comes, it's something that now needs to be ingrained in workplaces, and I think that we're definitely starting to see that, and hopefully things are moving in a more positive direction.
And hopefully they are. And of course, as we chatted just briefly, Joe, before we came on, I mean, we might be coming through the end of the pandemic. We're now watching, Ukraine making the headlines. Stress and worry and anxiety still continues, doesn't it? We might be living in, hopefully, a pandemic-free society, but people still have problems, personal problems. I think the roles you guys do are so important. What challenges, though, Joe, do you face along the way? Because I'm sure it's not always plain sailing when you're trying to help.
Absolutely. It is a very rewarding area to work in. And I do see the results of that, like on literally a daily basis. It is also quite challenging, particularly at this current time, because of course everyone's had their own unique experience during the pandemic, and that might relate to the work that we do in particular, but it might also relate to the personal experiences and the journey that we've been on over this time. And at our own organisation, we've got a mixture of both frontline employees and also a large proportion of our workforce has been based remotely. And therefore it is really challenging to find some initiatives that if you like suit everybody, and that kind of, if you like, play to supporting some of those very varied challenges that people have experienced. And of course, as I'm sure many of us do, know individuals, friends, family, or colleagues that have perhaps lost somebody as a result of the pandemic and have gone through a really horrific experience, to those that potentially have sailed through it and have actually found it quite a positive experience due to some of the lifestyle changes that perhaps they've been able to make over this period. So it is always really difficult to find a set of initiatives or kind of activities within the workplace that really appeals to everybody. And another thing to mention as well is, of course, there are a number of new ways of working as well that a lot of us are getting used to. And again, it's quite challenging to balance things correctly with the introduction of hybrid working that I know a number of workplaces are taking forward. There are numerous benefits to kind of working in this way, but there's also challenges as well around kind of making sure that employees still have that sense of belonging and that connection with colleagues, and perhaps don't work like excessively long hours, and therefore kind of, if you like, suffer with burnout as well as the isolation issues. So there's a constant kind of flex really between balancing a number of really important factors, some of which are kind of internal to us as an organisation, but many of which are unpredictable and are kind of, if you like, external factors that we're kind of constantly needing to make sure that are considered as we go forward.
There's that kind of water cooler moment as well, isn't it? I hate that phrase really, but just getting out of the lift or just going to get a cup of water in a workplace where somebody's saying, "Oh, are you okay?" It's passing the time of day, and in hybrid working, that's something that's some people have probably missed. And I wonder if sometimes people have gone under the radar because we've been doing this new kind of at-home working. It's all very different. Just a quick question from Jim, Joe, which you might be able to answer. Jim says, what's your view on the railway now working towards night shift working and the effect that has on the well-being of the workforce? Is that something that you give some consideration to in Manchester?
Well, interestingly, so at Transport for Greater Manchester, we don't tend to employ sort of, those individuals that are working like on the railway particularly. We have a relatively small number of operational teams based out at bus stations across Greater Manchester. But I do know we do have a small number of employees that do work night shifts, and it is an incredible challenge to make sure that, if you like, they are balancing their own sort of personal needs with those quite challenging shifts.
Yeah,
And I know that's something that we're continuously looking at.
Patients might be able to add to that, because I suppose Network Rail, you've got
Sure.
a far greater number of people working some pretty unsociable hours, I would imagine.
Yes, definitely. Most of our workforce do work during the unsocial hours, because that's when we can look after the railway. That's when we can repair and do all sorts. So we do have night working. What we have for Wellbeing is to ensure that we assess them every year, just to make sure that their health is still good and they're having a good balance. And then while they are working, we ensure that they have adequate rest time between from one shift to the next, and then from one set of shifts to the next shift. So they need to have proper adequate rest. So we have fatigue risk assessments that we carry out within the teams. And then we also look at, so we ensure that if this team is quite tired, and also the individuals are informed if they do feel tired, they do need to say, otherwise it really costs, and it can cost lives as well. So we look after that, doing using that, and then we have we make sure that when they are on site and they're working, they have welfare facilities, and they are well catered for, and then also they're within reach if they needed food, if they needed to warm their food, if they needed drinks. They've got everything available close to them. So that is all within the package of support that they have. And of course, they do have their line managers with them all the time.
And on a personal note, Patience, how do you manage fatigue? I know you're a working mom with a young family. How do you balance your life and sort of make sure there's a little bit of patience time in there for you left at the end of the day?
So it can be overwhelming sometimes if you don't take time to look at yourself, like what Rachel was saying earlier. So I do take time to breathe, and to have time with my family. And the Network Rail is very supportive of family as well. So that's one good thing. So it's family friendly, and if and I'm able to work flexibly as well, and I can adjust my hours to suit my family needs. And if there was a challenge with my children, I can take time off as
You're
well.
supported. That's really good to hear. And Rachel, the use of that word family there, I mean, rail, we've used it today actually, and we've used it at many of these conferences, but rail to me feels like a family. I kind of host these events and feel like as the host, I'm part of the rail family. Can other sectors, do you think, Rachel, take a lead from rail?
I think so. And I think that there is a real kind of sense of we're all in this together. And I know sometimes it can be difficult when you've got kind of people on the front line and they're working kind of the unsociable hours, and they sort of see the people with the nice little office jobs and they think, well, hold on, you've forgotten about us. But I think there has been a lot of work in certainly the last few years to kind of reconcile that and really make sure, as Patience was kind of saying, that actually the people that are working at the unsociable hours are actually really taken care of. And I think that it's not just about the expertise that people bring into the railway, it's about looking after them as individuals, because I think that people stay because they're passionate about the railway, but they're also passionate about the people that they work with. And you tend to find that once you're in the railway, you don't often leave. And I think that that's that real sense of kind of you know, you do work hard and sometimes you end up in quite challenging situations, but at the end of the day, people are prioritized above everything else. And I think that's something that's just really, really key, and hopefully we'll start to see in other industries as well. So yeah, definitely.
Look like for you in terms of the wider impact of your wellbeing strategy?
I think for me, because I place such an important emphasis on the culture of openness that we're developing here at Transport for Greater Manchester, and it's something that we are developing, like we talk about it, it's evident, but you know, it could go further. And for me, it's all about ensuring that colleagues feel comfortable to reach out and talk about their mental well-being in exactly the same way as they talk about their physical health. So when somebody says, "How are you?" that you're not just replying with the standard, "Oh, I'm fine, thank you very much," but actually you were able to genuinely sort of give an honest answer, and so therefore people can really be their authentic selves in the way that they engage with work, with their line manager, with colleagues, and so on. Recognizing that the importance of that openness, and actually kind of how that can massively help improve well-being and also encourage others, as I sort of mentioned before, through sort of demonstrating that vulnerability. And I think that would really optimize well-being if people were able to kind of, you know, if you like, be totally comfortable with the subject matter. And it would really help them be able to flourish and thrive, both in the workplace, but in all areas of their lives as well.
I think you've worked, Jo, for Transport for Greater Manchester for 12 years. And I think you said on the notes that everybody submitted beforehand that you found your niche. Where does your passion for wellbeing come from?
I think it's from dipping my toe in, like, you know, quite a few years ago, before it was a subject matter that everyone was so driven by, if you like, and really recognizing the impact that it can have on an individual's life if they're able to open up and share some of their experiences that they're having either at work or personally, and to genuinely see the relief on someone's face when they kind of open up and sometimes tearfully explain to you what's been going on in their personal lives, or something that they've been worried about to do with work, and to hear the words, "It's okay, I and that relief, I've seen it so many times across the organisation, all levels of the organisation as well. You know, when somebody knows that there is help at hand and that somebody understands, and it is okay to be open about this stuff, and it quite genuinely can change that individual's experience of work, but also be incredibly pivotal at how they're then able to engage with all aspects of their lives. And I do get these amazing emails from time to time from people, often after the event, actually, where people do get in touch and express how much it has the ability to, if you like, have that discussion with me at that point. What difference that has made to so many areas of their world. And you know, I think it started from that, to be quite honest, and then developed, and then thankfully the organisation was really accepting and really supportive of wellbeing taking off as a, you know, massive part of our culture and our overall people strategy.
That's so nice to hear. Tracy's put a question in for you, Patience, live Q&A. Do you force have a good understanding of, now it says HAV, and I don't know what that acronym means. I'm sure it means something to you.
It's hand-arm vibration. I'm thinking, yes. Do I feel the workforce have an understanding of hand-arm vibration? We are getting there, I should say.
Yes, it is hand-arm vibration. Tracy's just confirmed that. Yeah.
Yes. Within Eastern region, we had a challenge with hand-arm vibration at some point. And as you know, within the rail, we use machinery and equipment that does have an impact on our workforce. And hand-arm vibration can be inevitable if not controlled. So we have implemented within the region and within the wider network rail support and information on hand-arm vibration. I have gone on a mission where I have done workshops or road shows with line managers and then with individuals, telling them, raising the profile of hand-arm vibration and re-educating them. And they do have a HAVS briefing every year, and it's mandatory. They do have HAVS surveillance every year, and it's mandatory. So if they are using vibrating tools, they do get this regularly. And I think they do have a good awareness.
Yeah, that's a good answer. And apologies to Tracy that I didn't know the acronym, but I do know a bit about hand-arm vibration. We did a section on it in our live rail conference that we've just held at the Vox in Birmingham. So thank you, Tracy, for submitting that question. And I hope patients' answer is what you needed. And just as we wrap, Rachel, just a final thought. If people are watching this today and are thinking, you know what, I actually could do with a little bit of help, I haven't had the courage to, go forward and speak to anybody, what would you say to anybody who's thinking, actually, maybe it is time to see what kind of support's out there and go and talk to somebody? How would you encourage them to take that rather brave step, I think, and do it?
You're absolutely right. It's a really brave thing to do, and it can be the last thing that you feel like doing when you sort of get to that point where you think, I probably do need to have some conversations or need some support. It's really, really hard to know where to start. And I think my advice to people would just be to have one conversation, to find one person, whether that's a colleague, a friend, a relative, just somebody that you trust, that you're not expecting them to change the world for you. You're not expecting them to change how you're feeling, but you just know that if you open up to them, they will listen. Because I think something that puts people off opening up is the idea that they'll be rejected or something. Their kind of worries and concerns as being really trivial, or think, well, okay, well, I've got it much worse, so what are you moaning about? But actually to have that one person that I think you can just really just say, hey, I can't really explain what's going on right now, but I don't feel great and I just need a friendly face. Can we go for a coffee, or can we have a chat, or can we go for a walk? I just think it allows you to feel a bit lighter, because I think when you don't know how to have those conversations, or you don't know where to start, you just end up feeling really heavy and it's very draining. And I think just to even open a tiny fraction of the door and just kind of letting somebody know that you're not feeling great, it can make the world of difference. And I think it's something that we all probably need to get a bit better at doing, because everyone's busy and you think, oh, I don't want to bother them with how I'm feeling, but actually they'll take that and hopefully they'll check in with you, or just kind of send a text and say, how are you doing? And I think just to know that there's somebody there that knows that things are quite right, I think is really key.
I think taking that first step is always the hardest step, but I think your organisation's patients, Rachel and Joe, are very lucky to have you. And I know that I would take that brave step with any one of you three if I felt in that situation. So thank you for sharing and for just encouraging people to be bold and be brave and just say if they're not feeling great. Really, really nice to talk to you. I hope you'll take part in another of our events in the coming months. It's been great to have you. Massive thanks to our panelists who have really enlightened us on what is a delicate topic. So massive thanks. Time now for you to process everything that we've covered so far today by jumping into a break. Last chance to climb the gamification leaderboard by networking and visiting the marketplace. Although you can, of course, network with those in the platform long after today's event is over. Again, grab a cuppa and join me back here at 2:55 for our last session on training and development. I'll see you then.